today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. You then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
But what we absolutely know is that it is not women working at the FAA that caused that crash. What we definitely know is it is not black employees at the FAA that caused that crash.
What he has said is not only unprofessional, unpresidential, inconsiderate of the status of this investigation, but frankly, it is just unhinged.
Unfortunately, in America, in 2025, there is nothing so sacred as we can't start the process of investigation with a little bit of misinformation, or in this case, a lot of it.
The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. The Department of Transportation is government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity.
Meanwhile,
So Donald Trump shut down an airline safety committee during the first couple days of his presidency, one that oversaw safety issues at airports. Here is the headline from last week. I think it's time to give this a read. Quote, Trump guts key aviation safety committee, fires head of TSA and Coast Guard. The committee will technically continue to exist, but it won't have any members to carry out the work of examining safety issues at airlines and airports. Also, 8 days ago, Donald Trump signed another executive order to freeze all air traffic control hiring. Here is that report. Let's give the headline a read. Quote, Trump's dangerous freeze of air traffic control hiring. And in that report, a ranking member on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure warns that this freeze will lead to safety issues. So there is no correlation so far with any of these executive orders and the fatal crash that just occurred in Washington, D.C., but I thought I would put this information out there. Yeah.
It's for Secretary Duffy. Have you been in touch with the air traffic controllers who were in the tower at the time of the crash?
I have not.
You have not.
Is there an acting FAA director?
Mr. President, was there a shortage of staff at the control tower at DCA last night you're aware of?
Well, that's part of competence right there. They shouldn't have that happen. Right there is what I'm talking about. Competence would be you're not going to have a shortage. But if you had the right people, you wouldn't need as many people either.
Do you know if there was a shortage last night or not? Or
I don't know. No, I don't know. You're telling me something.
Are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power. You have to go by psychological quality. And psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden. And Biden went by a standard that's the exact opposite. So we don't know.
We don't even yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed, and you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think with the names of the people, you mean the names of the people that are on the plane? You think that's going to make a difference?
Does it comfort their families
They
to
are
hear you
a
blaming
group of
DEI
people that have
policies?
lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon. We're in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question.
But are you
I'm
blaming-
surprised coming from you.
Are you blaming air
Yeah, please, go
Yes,
ahead.
thank you. We see like everyday life that very often those diversity hires cause sometimes issues, as you just mentioned. So what plan do you have? Are we going to see some fire? Are you going to fire some of those diversity hires in the federal government? What's plan do you have?
I would say the answer is yes. If we find that people aren't mentally competent, you see the language. The language is put out by them. And if you see that, I'm not going to bore you by reading it again, but these are not people that should be doing this particular job. They'd be very good for certain jobs, but not people that should be doing this particular job.
Today, blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. We then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level. When you have 60 planes coming in during a short period of time, and they're all coming in different directions, and you're dealing with very high-level computer work and very complex computers. And one of the other things I will tell you is that the systems that were built, I was going to rebuild the entire system, and then we had an election that didn't turn out the way it should have.
We need to get to the bottom of what happened. Nobody's going to know today what caused that crash. But what we absolutely know is that it is not women working at the FAA that caused that crash. What we definitely know is it is not black employees at the FAA that caused that crash. There are some true things. President Trump forced out of office the administrator of the FAA. He's been waging a regular assault on public employees since he came into office. He forced the entire Aviation Security Review Board, Advisory Board, to step down.
He showed up with one message: it's DEI's fault. Then Hegseth says DEI, then Duffy says DEI, and then J.D. Vance, maybe playing a little bit of cleanup, says, well, if it wasn't DEI in terms of the pilots it's very stressful to work with people when we have these kinds of DEI policies. DEI is not a scapegoat for everything.
When you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means on the one hand, you're not getting the best people in government, but on the other hand, it puts stresses on the people who are already there. We want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control, and we want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job. If you go back to just some of the headlines over the past 10 years, you have many hundreds of people suing the government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the color of their skin. That policy ends under Donald Trump's leadership because safety is the first priority of our aviation industry.
Meanwhile,
so like J.D. Vance, I am a former Marine who used their GI Bill to attend Yale University. Here's my degree right there. And like J.D. Vance, who attended Yale Law School, I was there at the same time as him. We actually sat on the board of the Yale Veterans Association, which is an alumni association. And we both were able to be recipients of DEI efforts at Yale University. At the time that I was a student, there were only 5 veterans in my entire program. There are currently 25 in the divinity school program now. In the undergraduate program, there are about 8 veterans. In the Eli Whitney program, there are currently about 15. Now, the law school where J.D. Vance was a student, he was one of about 6 students at the time at the law school. Currently, I'm pretty sure their numbers are in the 20s or the 30s when it comes to veterans. So these efforts to increase and push diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that benefited J.D. Vance. And he is now turning around and he's pulling the ladder up so that people like him who grew up in poor Appalachia, who joined the Marines, who were able to use the GI Bill, are no longer able to follow in his footsteps because he wants to remove the same DEI programs that got him to where he is today.
Is there any reason to believe there was any foul play here?
Well, at this time, you hate to jump to any conclusions. Obviously, we'll look at everything, check all the boxes. I had just taken off from D.C. Before the crash, and of course, it came across my cell phone, and I saw it and was horrified. So prayers go out to all those impacted. But, to your point, I think you have to look at this with eyes wide open, see what happened. Human error, was it some sort of equipment failure? Did DEI play a role in this type of thing? So I think you look at it.
For a lot of conservatives, they believe DEI just means black people getting jobs. And so when they see a black person in any job, they say, oh, that person's a DEIer. They said it about the literal elected vice president of the United States.
Absolutely.
She wasn't hired. She was hired by the American people. 80 million Americans voted for her, but they can't see through her race and gender.
We are still trying to find out what happened. That did not stop Trump this morning from holding a press conference and saying that President Biden caused the crash. President Obama also caused the crash, who hasn't been in power since 2016. That would be 9 years ago. Secretary Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation, who's no longer in power, caused it as well. Diversity programs caused it, hiring minorities. And Trump, interestingly, and I think, not most disturbingly, but disturbingly, blamed it on the military pilot. He said the military pilot of the helicopter caused the crash. We don't know that. He doesn't know that. There's no evidence at all to suggest that. We don't know what happened. We don't know what happened with both of them. The plane caused the pilot error, air traffic control error. Very disturbing. Particularly Trump's claim that it was, incompetent people at the agencies. Incompetent Obama and Biden hires, DEI, diversity, right? Minorities. Here's the problem. Look who Trump hired for the Department of Transportation and the Pentagon, the 2 agencies involved in this crash. At the Pentagon, Trump hired a Fox News host to be Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. At the Department of Transportation, Trump hired a Fox News regular, Duffy, is his name, to be Secretary of Transportation. Maybe, if we're going to call into question the qualifications of political appointees and nominees, we should be asking why people are getting jobs simply because they're Fox News hosts. That's a problem. For this crash now going forward, we need to know what really happened. We need qualified people at the head of these agencies looking into what happened, not people who were chosen because they look good on TV. We need to know that the agencies investigating are looking for the truth, not looking for what Trump already said happened. We don't want the agencies to blame the military pilot just because Trump said he was to blame. We don't want the agencies to blame minorities just because Trump said they're to blame, or to blame Barack Obama or President Biden. I still think it's hilarious that Obama is guilty when he left office, 9 years ago. This is very bad. It's a horrible crash, but it's just a really horrible aftermath. Not surprising from Trump, but very sad and very typical and very unhelpful for the nation.
I put my head in my hands, Pam, when the president said that. This is something that has been pushed by the far right for a few months now, that DEI policies are to blame in a degradation of safety in aviation in the United States. But frankly, the president is getting out ahead of his skis here. What he has said is not only unprofessional, unpresidential, inconsiderate of the status of this investigation, but frankly, it is just unhinged. That he could even say with any sort of certainty that diversity, equity, and inclusion policies had any part to play in this accident. Remember that 67 people are dead. I hate to get so upset here, but this is something that investigators will really need to pick apart piece by piece, and that is going to take some really significant time. We're not even 24 hours after this crash. We're barely even 12 hours after this crash. And he is saying with a lot of certainty that the blame is on DEI, and the blame is in some ways on air traffic control and air traffic controller hiring. I have to feel for the air traffic controllers in the tower at Reagan National Airport who had to essentially sit there helplessly and make the call to first responders to say we have a serious aircraft crash at 8:48 last night. Let's parse out some more of this, because it's really significant here that President Trump also put some of the blame on Democrats. He said that Transportation Secretary, now former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, engaged in BS. He actually used the full word live on television. The fact of the matter is that Transportation Secretary Buttigieg was very hard on aviation safety. There was a day-long safety stand-down because of the rise of near collisions on the runways at commercial airports nationwide that really took off in 2023. I did a sit-down interview with Buttigieg. He was well-versed on the topic. He knew the points. He knew where the blind spots were, and the FAA and the Department of Transportation from the top down of the Biden administration was taking that problem very seriously. He also was incredibly hard on airlines and consumer protections.
Here's what Buttigieg posted on his X account. Let's give this a read. Quote, "Despicable. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. ... President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again." Well, we know Trump won't do that, as he just took the podium and blamed DEI for the plane crash without any evidence or investigation, but kudos to Pete Buttigieg for correctly pointing out that it is Donald Trump who oversees the FAA, and it is Donald Trump who just signed an order to fire a bunch of airline personnel, which undeniably impacts safety measures and protocols.
The big bottom line here is that there are so many vacancies in the federal government when it comes to aviation safety. There is no administrator of the FAA right now. President Trump has not put somebody forth for that.
Is there an acting FAA director?
There is no administrator of the Transportation Security Administration. The Trump administration needs to put somebody forth for that as well.
The saddest part about all of this is, in a moment where we not only should be showing love and sending condolences and care and doing what we can to try and ensure that this doesn't happen again, we are trying to demonize people who we perceive as other, whether it be immigrants, whether it be Muslims, and sad to say, whether it be black people. Because that's where all the DEI stuff comes from, us not being considered a part of. And as long as all of this time and energy is being devoted to demonizing the other, it leaves you extremely vulnerable to the danger that emerges from right here. You are actually willing to be less safe to preserve your racism. Hey, I want to thank you guys so much for supporting the channel as we approach a new administration and the changing winds of our media landscape. I want to invite you to join my channel. I think it's very important to preserve a space and a platform where I can communicate clearly and honestly, as all of our creators are hoping to maintain. Unfortunately, it looks like that ground may be evaporating right underneath our feet. So I wanted to let you know I'm going to continue to post on my channel, but I'll also be posting more in the membership section as well, so we can have clear and honest conversations. You can find the button to join right there on my page. There's also a link in the description box to all of my videos. I also want to invite you to join my mindfulness and meditation channel. That's my second channel. It is Way of Waters, cause we gonna need it. We gonna need it. I might wear that thing out by the midterms.